This story exists for no strong reason. It does not explain itself. It does not introduce anyone. And it does not have a clear goal. If you miss a part, nothing will be affected. If you fall asleep, the story will not take it personally. It will continue quietly doing its best to not require anything from you. Nothing has happened yet. This is normal. It will take a moment before anything worth not paying attention to begins. At some point, things start happening. This is slightly unfortunate because neither of them had planned to deal with anything new at this stage of their lives. Still, it happens. They begin seeing each other in the same places. This was not requested, but the universe is not known for asking. The same grocery store, the same aisle, the same feeling of, why am I even here right now? They pretend not to notice. This feels less tiring for everyone involved. One day they sit on the same bench, in the same park. There is no plan. Standing simply feels unnecessary. They do not talk. This is not awkward. They do not have the energy for awkward. The silence stretches. No one panics. It is a mature silence. Another day they find themselves waiting in a line. No one knows what the line is for. Everyone looks strangely committed. No one leaves. Perhaps the line itself is the point. Someone near the front asks, "What is this line for?" No one answers. This also counts as an answer. After a while, the line dissolves. Whatever it was meant to do, it seems to have done it. They exchange a look, the kind that says, "We probably should not explain this to anyone." They walk away in opposite directions. A few days later, they both receive an email. There is no subject line. This feels intentional. The message says, "Please do not overthink the situation." This advice arrives a little late, but the intention is appreciated. They do not reply. The email does not return. After that, small things begin to behave slightly incorrectly. Streetlights dim when they walk past each other. Not fully. The lights seem unsure. A clock in a public building stops for exactly 1 minute when they are there at the same time. Then it continues, politely. No one reacts. They notice. They do not bring it up. This feels like the correct decision. They keep running into each other in places where nothing important happens. A cafe where the music stops suddenly and no one bothers to turn it back on. A train that pauses between stations for slightly too long. No one complains. A movie that skips a scene. No one misses it. Each time they are near each other, not together. Just close enough to notice what is happening, but not close enough to discuss it. One evening, one of them says, as if commenting on the weather, "Strange things have been happening lately." The other nods. Yes, they have. They sit with that information for a while. No one suggests a solution. Solutions feel ambitious. They finish their drinks. They stand up. They walk in opposite directions. Behind them, the cafe lights flicker once. Then they decide everything is fine. The city keeps going. A little carelessly, but well enough. The feeling remains. No one defines it. No one resolves it. No one expects an ending. This story, after all, was never important enough to require one. And somehow, that makes everything easier. After a while, the world seems to get involved a little more than necessary. Nothing dramatic, just mildly inconvenient. They start noticing small changes whenever they are in the same general area. A crosswalk light stays red longer than usual. Not forever, just long enough to be noticed. A door opens slightly later, as if it needs a moment to think about it. Once a street sign is pointing in the wrong direction. No one fixes it. No one seems bothered. They do not assume this has anything to do with them. That would feel self-centered. Still, they notice the timing. One afternoon, they end up on the same bus. This feels excessive. There are other buses, other routes, other options. Yet here they are. They sit far enough apart to avoid making it a thing. Close enough to be aware of it anyway. The bus stops suddenly, not because of traffic, not because of an emergency. It simply stops. The driver waits. The passengers wait. Someone checks their phone. Someone sighs. No one asks questions. After a few minutes, the bus continues as if it had briefly forgotten what it was doing. They get off at different stops. Later that day, both of them notice. They have an extra key in their pocket. Not a familiar key, not one they recognize. Just a key. They do not remember picking it up. They do not remember losing anything either. They decide not to investigate. Investigation feels like commitment. That evening, they see each other again. This time, they acknowledge it. Not with words, just a nod. This feels like progress. They do not discuss that either. The city continues behaving oddly. An elevator pauses between floors. Long enough to be awkward, not long enough to be alarming. A vending machine offers 2 items. When only one was paid for, no one complains. A radio announces the wrong time, corrects itself, then apologizes. They start wondering. If this is happening everywhere, they never find out. One night they almost talk about it again. Almost. One of them opens their mouth, then closes it. The other takes a sip of their drink and decides this is not the moment. The moment passes. It always does. They begin to feel that something is slowly building. Not tension, not excitement, more like a quiet accumulation, like dust or unread messages. Nothing demands action. Nothing insists on being resolved. And that somehow makes it worse or better. It is hard to tell. At some point, the strange things start happening less often. The lights behave. The clocks cooperate. The buses remember their routes. The world seems to lose interest. The feeling does not. It remains, unchanged, patient. They see each other one last time. In a place neither of them remembers choosing. They stand there for a moment, long enough to consider saying something meaningful. Nothing meaningful arrives. They exchange a small smile. The polite kind, the unfinished kind. Then they leave. Nothing dramatic happens after that. No realization, no regret. Life continues at a reasonable pace. Somewhere a streetlight flickers. This time it has nothing to do with them. Probably. After that last meeting, life does what it usually does. It keeps going. They do not suddenly forget each other. That would be too clean. They also do not think about each other constantly. That would be exhausting. Instead, the other person becomes one of those quiet thoughts that shows up without warning, while folding laundry, while waiting for water to boil, while standing in a doorway, trying to remember why they came there. It is not romantic, it is just present. Sometimes they each notice small reminders. A bench that looks familiar. A cafe they do not remember visiting, but feel oddly comfortable avoiding. Once one of them finds a receipt. In a coat pocket, the date means nothing. The place is unimportant. They keep it anyway. They do not know why. The city behaves normally now, mostly. The clocks agree on the time. The lights stay on. The buses behave like buses. This should feel reassuring. It does not change much. Occasionally, something almost happens. They reach for the same door, from opposite sides. They stop at the same crosswalk and stand there a little too long. After the light changes, they hear someone laugh and turn their head at the same moment. Each time they hesitate, not because they are unsure, because hesitation has become familiar. Familiar things feel safe. One evening, they run into each other unexpectedly. Unexpected, even though this keeps happening. They stand there. Again. This time they actually speak. Not about anything important. One of them says something about the weather. The other agrees. The conversation lasts exactly as long as it needs to. When it ends, there is a pause. A small one. Noticeable. Unnecessary. Either of them could say something else. Neither does. They smile. The soft kind. The kind meant to close things gently. They walk away. Later that night, one of them dreams. Nothing symbolic. Nothing meaningful. They are in a room. The other person is there too. They are not doing anything. The dream feels realistic enough to be disappointing. In the morning, the feeling is still there. Smaller now, but not gone. Time passes. Weeks, months. They stop expecting coincidences, which is when they happen less. Eventually, the feeling changes shape. It becomes quieter, less specific, like a song you no longer remember but would recognize. If it started playing again, they do not know. If this story is over, they also do not know. If it ever really started. Nothing announces an ending. Nothing asks to be wrapped up. The world does not pause to see how this turns out. And honestly, that seems fair. Some stories exist just long enough to be felt, not solved, not explained, just felt. And then very politely they make room for whatever comes next. After a while, they both stop expecting anything specific. This turns out to be useful. Life becomes a series of small, manageable moments. Nothing demands interpretation. They wake up. They go places. They forget things. They remember others. Occasionally, something reminds them of each other. Not in a dramatic way. More like noticing a familiar object in a room you do not own anymore. One of them hears a song they do not particularly like. It reminds them anyway. The other notices a pattern on the sidewalk that looks exactly like nothing important. That also works. They never talk about these things. They wouldn't know how. The feeling continues to exist without asking permission. Sometimes it feels closer, sometimes it feels distant. It never announces what it plans to do. One afternoon, they almost meet again. They arrive at the same place, just minutes apart. One leaves, the other arrives. Nothing overlaps. This seems intentional. It probably is not. The city keeps offering small opportunities for coincidence. Two chairs facing each other, with no one sitting. A cafe table set for two, used by one person. An empty seat on a train. That feels like it should not be empty. They notice these things. They do not assign meaning. Meaning feels like extra work. At some point, they both start telling the story differently, inside their own heads. One of them thinks that was something. The other thinks that was almost something. Both feel accurate. They never compare versions. Time passes in a gentle, unremarkable way. Seasons change without consulting anyone. They become older by a reasonable amount. The feeling changes again. It becomes lighter, less attached to specific moments, more like a quiet preference for a certain kind of silence, a certain pace. One evening, one of them sits alone and suddenly laughs, not out loud, just internally, at how unnecessary all of this was. The timing, the coincidences, the almosts. It feels comforting somehow. Elsewhere, the other person is doing something equally ordinary. They pause for a second, not because of anything specific, just because. The pause passes, nothing important happens, and that is the most consistent thing about this story. It never asks to be finished. It never demands closure. It simply continues to exist, quietly, politely in the background of two separate lives. Like a sentence that does not need a period to be complete. Eventually, they both get used to the idea that some things simply stay unfinished. This turns out to be less uncomfortable than expected. They learn how to carry the feeling without checking on it too often. Like an item in a bag. You know is there, but do not need to take out. Some days they forget it entirely. Other days it shows up quietly, while tying their shoes, while waiting for a page to load, while standing in a room. That feels a little too quiet. There is no pattern. Patterns would imply intention. One morning, one of them almost sends a message. The message is short, harmless, nothing that would change anything. They type it. They read it. They decide it says exactly what it says, which is nothing. They do not send it. The phone stays silent. It seems relieved. Somewhere else, the other person is also considering something. Not a message, just a thought. They think, I wonder what that was. The thought does not go anywhere. It does not need to. Life continues offering small, forgettable moments. A door that does not open on the first try. A light that flickers, then behaves. A chair that feels more comfortable than expected. None of this matters, which is comforting. Occasionally, they pass places where they used to almost meet. They walk by without slowing down. Not because they are avoiding anything, because slowing down feels unnecessary now. The feeling changes again. It becomes softer, less personal, more like a general fondness. for things that never demanded much. One evening, they both noticed the same moon. Not together, not at the same time, just the same shape, the same quiet brightness. Neither of them thinks about the other person then. This feels like progress. Or maybe not. It is difficult to say. Time continues doing what it does best. Days fold into weeks, weeks into something less specific. The story does not end. It also does not continue in any dramatic way. It simply becomes part of the background, a detail, a footnote, a pause that never needed filling. And if someone were to ask what this story was about, the honest answer would be simple. It was about two people, a series of mildly strange events, and a feeling that did not require action. Nothing more than that, which in the end was probably enough.